Hello and welcome to the final fifth unit of our second week in the course Avoid SAP S/4HANA project delays with third-party systems service virtualization. My name is Marcin Gałczyński. In this video, I will show you how to use SAP Tailored Service Virtualization for simulating responses from B2B partners. Remember Daphne, the SAP consultant working on the project? One of her responsibilities is configuring a purchasing process involving an external party. The process starts with a purchase requisition, converted into a purchase order, and the system then issues an EDI message with this purchase order to an external supplier. The supplier responds with an advanced shipping notification confirming allocated quantities. In the system, such confirmation updates the purchase order with expected delivery dates and create an inbound delivery document. Daphne is skilled enough to be able to manually create such an inbound delivery as she is unit testing the configuration. However, the purchasing process is an input to other scenarios. As the system build continues, she receives requests from other teams to process a few more purchase orders. She would also have to process them manually to support business tests later in the project. Virtualization can help her save time during build and increase test effectiveness, as business teams can test more process instances independently. Let's see how one would initiate the process. I will start with logging into the SAP system. I'm starting with the SAP logon and I'm going to enter my demo IDES system. Let me put in the logon data. And as mentioned before, I will go to the purchase order creation transaction ME21N. I will use my test data here, providing vendor, purchase organization, purchasing group, and the company code. And I will place a simple order for a material. I need to also provide the plant. And so my simple purchase order is ready. I will now save it. And I will store the number so we can use it later in the process. Let me now display this purchase order that we've just created. And you can see there are no confirmations. I can also display the messages. You can now see that the EDI output was created as a result of creation of this purchase order. At this stage, without service virtualization in place that is, Daphne would have to pretend to be the supplier by creating a delivery manually. So let's see how virtualizing the business partner makes a difference. What you can see now in front is the home screen of the INT4 suite. Today we will use the messenger part and we'll go and see the service virtualization scenarios. The scenario that we've configured for this demo is called VO_1 Virtualizations of Vendors Deliveries, and it is based on the SAP PO. Let me open that for you. And we can see that the virtualization is enabled. However, we are not using automatic responses in this scenario. I can see that there are a total of 85 messages. 9 of them are converted and ready to be sent back, and we've sent already 76 responses. I'll go now to the converted messages, and I can see that the messages were generated. We can look in details into the trigger message, and we can see here the IDOC structure of the document, and you can also notice the purchase order number that we've created before. In order to support operator, we can also search the messages via the content so that we can filter and narrow down the screen to the document that we are interested in. Now I can preview the response, which is an XML file that would be then originally sent by the vendor. I can mark it and send the response. Now that the response is sent, I can get back to the SAP GUI. I will now go to the purchase order display transaction ME23N, and you can see our purchase order being open, and you can see a confirmation here and a number of an inbound delivery that was created as a result of sending back the response from the external partner. It looks simple, and indeed it is. Service virtualization takes care of message capture, generating a response and sending it, pretending to be the business partner. However, sometimes Daphne might want to adjust the reaction before it's sent back, for example, for under or over delivery scenarios. So I will now show you how to do it. So now we're back to the INT4 Suite Messenger, into the service virtualization scenarios, and I can go directly into the converted messages from the list screen. Again, I have a list of the documents, and let me put in the number of the new purchase order that I created to demonstrate this feature. Once I found it, I can click on the response, and now I can edit the response message, and I can provide a new quantity. For example, if we want to simulate an scenario in which the purchase order is not fully confirmed. Let's say I just want to confirm half of the size of the order. So let me update here to 0.5 and save the message. Now the message is saved. I can close the window, and now I will trigger this response. The response has been sent. I can get back to the SAP GUI, and I can go to the purchase orders view screen. Putting in the purchase order number, and now I can see the confirmation for this purchase order is only confirmed for the 0.5 as I modified in the message. We did a simple change of quantity there. It's also possible to amend dates and other data elements to simulate different scenarios without having to construct the response from scratch. Let me now show you the building blocks of such a virtualization setup. So we're back to the messenger, and I go back to the service virtualization scenarios. From this screen, I can go directly to what we call the virtualization object for the VA01 scenario, and this virtualization object consists of a few elements. The basic information is the type, which is an asynchronous response, and the profile, which is configuration based, which means that the response will be generated based on the setup of the system. For processing, we need automation objects to be configured. First one is the trigger object, which identifies the interface on which we are searching for messages that we will want to respond to, and then the response object, which defines the interface through which we will send back the response. Both those objects are actually automation objects in INT4 Suite. So you can see that they define a specific interface. In this case, that's an IDOC interface on PI. And we can configure also variables so that searching for messages will be easier in the future. Now let's look at the response object. And again, you can see it's configured for PI. The interface name and namespace are provided, and we can also configure variables and payload validations for this object. By configuring the payloads validations, we can ensure that IFTT will validate the response message for correctness, similarly to other testing scenarios. Finally, we need to define how do we map the captured message to the response. And in this case, we refer to a defined test case in INT4 suite. The number here for the transformation is actually a number of a test case. Let me get back to the main screen and go to the API Tester cockpit. Here, I can put the test case number and find that specific test case number that we are using. It's defined as PI manual inbound, but what is really interesting is the content of this test case. So let's see the payload here. And you can see the payload is an XSLT transformation which defines how do we copy the data from the inbound message to the response message. Let's take a moment to zoom into the XSLT. XSLT is a programming language for XML document transformation. So whenever the message is in this format, like it goes for iDocs, ABAP proxies and multiple business message formats, it is possible to convert it using XSLT. The internet is full of guides and online tools helping to write and test XSLT mappings, so that is a viable option. One thing to remember, XSLT mapping will only map the information that is already there in the message. There is an alternative if one needs to enrich the response with external data or needs to support a format different than XML. Daphne either has the skills herself or has a person in the team like Oscar that can work with the integration technology currently used in the project. All the popular integration platforms offer the ability to map messages from one structure to another. Such platforms provide much more mapping tools, usually other programming languages, graphical mappings, or callouts to external systems. Suppose the project uses SAP Cloud Integration, formerly known as CPI. In that case, the development team can build an iFlow that does the mapping, eventually enriching the data based on external sources. For example, instead of pointing to a test case with XSLT transformation, Daphne will point to one that is a PO or CPI unit test. Based on that, INT4 Messenger will call the flow indicated by the automation object to execute the mapping. The fact that INT4 Suite Messenger allows using the integration platform already present in the project means there is no need to learn additional tools or technologies. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and the whole week 2 of the course. See you in the next week of the course. It will start with Michał presenting the concept of citizen testing.